one of the questions you might have is, well, who authorizes a charter school? How do we go about doing that? Well, as a school board in a district, you are the authorizer. And so generally for a charter to happen in your district, the board is going to be the authorizer. Now, as you ask for proposals on a charter school, you may get a request from a group of staff members who really want to start a charter school, or it may come from some parents who would really like to see a particular type of approach in your district, or from some community members. But you as the board have got to consider those and have got to decide, do one of these work? A board could also, if you're really interested in generating some interest and generating some ideas, you may actually want to put out a request for proposals and invite people to come in and share their good ideas, because out of those good ideas, maybe you'll be able to fashion an approach that might look like the next charter school for the ABC school district. You don't know until you ask some people to put on their thinking caps and kick it around. And at the end of the day, maybe you'll decide, yes, we think we want to move forward on a charter, or maybe you'll decide, well, let's wait and let's talk about it again next year. But you gotta ask the question. And technically, a board is supposed to pose that question each year. And I don't want to put undue stress on a board saying, well, we're not doing our job. You'd be doing your job if you at least have a conversation about it and say, do we think we're ready to talk about charters? And if not, then come back to it at a later date. Considerations in approving a charter school. Well, you want to make sure that it does align with what you're doing in the district. A person can come forth with the greatest charter school proposal in the world, but if it's going a totally different direction than you're moving in a district, it's really doomed for failure from the start. So you'd be better off to modify that proposal and make it align with what you're doing in your vision and mission before moving forward. Next, is there sufficient interest by the staff to move forward? Because if you are going to do a charter that is going to use district staff, it's going to work a lot better if you've got people that are volunteering and excited about being in a charter school than if you as a board were just to say, well, we're going to assign these people to it and hope it works. I was fortunate in the district I work in, it was staff interest that really wanted to initiate a charter. I was the first obstacle they had to get by, in that they had to convince me that it was a good idea so that I would take it to the board and in turn use my influence to try to convince the board. And that's the way it should work. The need has to be recognized in a charter. And again, you can have the best charter school proposal in the world, but if there isn't a need for it, then it's probably not going to happen. You've got to make sure you've got leadership to form a governance board. And because as the charter regulations have changed in Wisconsin to conform better with the federal regulations, there's a lot more conversation about the governance board being a very active body. And in my experience, when charter schools begin to flounder and fail, it's because that original governance board that was really excited about getting things going and was meeting on a regular basis, all of a sudden some of your key people have left that governance board, and all of a sudden the meetings aren't as much of a priority as they were, and pretty quick you're not meeting every month, you're meeting quarterly, and then you're meeting twice a year, and then you're not meeting at all, and it falls apart. The legislation calls for the fact that you must create a legal entity, and that could be an LLC or a 501c3. And that all sounds really complicated, but actually if you work with a school attorney on it, it's not near as complicated as it sounds, but it is a necessary step to approve a charter school. You have to, if you're going to approve it, you have to have the name of a person or persons seeking permission to authorize a charter school. Now, it could be the board authorizing it, but in all likelihood, if a board's authorizing it, it's probably because somebody brought a proposal forward. And so one of those people that brought it forward is probably going to be the person named as the person seeking permission. And then you've got to have a person who's going to provide leadership to the charter school. And that may be a little fluid on the front end. It may be a staff member or two that are very excited about it, that get the idea initially launched. But eventually it's got to morph into who's going to lead the governance board. So the leadership will kind of change on the front end. A description of the educational program or model the charter is going to provide. You have the opportunity. There are a lot of different models operating in Wisconsin, and so you have the opportunity as a board to research one of those models, and perhaps if you're considering a proposal that either staff or community has brought in, you might want to say, do you know of another model like this that's operating somewhere in Wisconsin? Can we get some information on that? That gives you a little bit more background on should we consider authorizing this or not. And then finally, you've got to have, you've got to have a plan for how you're going to monitor progress in the charter school. But there again, it shouldn't be vastly different than the way you monitor progress right now in your school buildings. So you don't have to create something new and different. And as a matter of fact, I would strongly suggest that you don't create something different. Make it as much like what you're doing now, because you're holding them to the same type of accountability. And then you need a proposed governance structure, and that will ensure community involvement. And that governance structure will not necessarily be fully formed on the front end, but before you get the charter launched, that's all got to be in place. So that's a consideration. We're at a point where we need to stop, aren't we? No, we're not. The requirement, the additional requirements for starting a charter school is requirements in terms of how you're going to admit students into the school. You have to have some non-discriminatory way of showing that students can be admitted to the school. You've got to make sure you've got some basic operational policies that are going to ensure student safety, that are going to ensure that you have good discipline programs, and again, to ensure that enrollment is going to be non-discriminatory. And finally, you've got to have that ability to enter a contract with a board, and that goes back to what we were talking about with either a 501c or some structure like that.